She thought it was just a gift. I thought it was a trigger. My real job is to follow the money. The transfer arrived at 6:12 on my birthday. $500. The notification vibrated once against the metal surface of my desk, sharp in the quiet of the office. I was already logged into a secure terminal, reviewing overnight anomaly reports. The glow from the monitors flattened the room into shades of blue and gray. The message attached to the transfer was simple. For something nice. Love, Mom. Linda prefers gestures that can be measured. A wrapped box, a wire confirmation, a receipt forwarded with a heart emoji, and money to her is proof of care. She has always believed that generosity erases complexity. I did not accept the transfer. The application she used was unfamiliar to me. New interface, offshore registration, aggressive growth in the last quarter. We had circulated an internal bulletin about it 2 weeks earlier. Not illegal, not yet. But it was attracting attention for the wrong reasons. I opened the metadata. The transfer to me cleared through a domestic intermediary bank, clean routing, no immediate flags. But the funding wallet that sent it to my mother's account told a different story. The originating account had been layered through 3 separate entities in under 48 hours. Layering is rarely sentimental. I leaned back in my chair and reread the transaction chain from the top. $500 was nothing. We freeze accounts holding millions without ceremony. We map networks that stretch across continents. But scale is irrelevant. Patterns matter. The originating account had a familiar structure, repeated inbound wires in round figures, outbound transfers broken into uneven segments, a shell formation sequence I had seen before. My birthday sat at the end of a chain that did not belong in my life. To my family, I work an administrative job in a federal building. She does reports, my mother tells people. Lots of spreadsheets. At holidays, they ask if I still enjoy the stability. They mean the salary. They mean the predictability. Ethan's work, on the other hand, is described as visionary. He calls it a fintech startup. He speaks about decentralization and cross-border efficiency. He uses words like frictionless and disruptive. At dinner, he holds court with a glass of wine in one hand and a projected future in the other. My projects are summarized as compliance updates. I do not correct them. In reality, I sit inside a unit that tracks illicit financial flows connected to sanctioned entities. I analyze digital trails that pretend to disappear. I cross-reference corporate registries with customs data. I build case files that become subpoenas. I follow money until it reaches someone who believed they would never be seen. At 6:28, I pulled the correspondent bank information for the funding wallet. The intermediary clearing institution had been placed under enhanced review 6 weeks ago, Eastern Europe, known for accommodating high-risk clients under technical compliance. At 6:41, I expanded the search parameters. 3 additional wallets linked to the same clearing corridor, 2 connected to entities already under investigation for sanction evasion, small transfers, frequent, structured to avoid reporting thresholds. At 7:02, I searched for domestic corporate overlaps. A name appeared that I recognized immediately. The company was registered in another state 11 months earlier. No listed employees, no payroll filings, no physical presence beyond a commercial mailbox. Registered agent, a formation service that processes hundreds of entities per week. I had seen the name on a slide deck at my parents' dining table, Ethan's company. My pulse did not change. It rarely does. I opened the corporate registry filing. The beneficial ownership disclosure had been deferred under a temporary reporting exemption. The initial capital contribution was modest. Subsequent funding spikes aligned precisely with the inbound wires from the flagged corridor. I zoomed out. My mother's $500 had originated in a network that intersected with my brother's company at least 12 times in the past quarter. Coincidence is lazy thinking. I minimized the case window and stared at my reflection in the black glass of the inactive monitor. Discipline is a habit. It keeps the room from tilting. I replayed the last family dinner in my head. Ethan describing a new investor interested in scaling operations overseas. My mother leaning forward, proud. My father asking about projected returns. I had asked a single question about regulatory exposure in foreign markets. Ethan smiled at me in that patient way he reserves for children. "Don't worry," he said, "it's complicated." The room had laughed softly. I do not argue at tables. I observe. At 7:19, I began documenting. Transaction IDs, timestamps, routing numbers, corporate filings, cross-border links. I mapped the chain from the offshore corridor through intermediary accounts to the domestic shell. I noted the repeated structure of transfers, mid-five-figure inflows divided into smaller outbound segments. At 8:03, I attached the findings to an existing internal case file concerning the correspondent bank. I added a notation, domestic nexus identified. At 8:11, I paused. This was the moment when personal awareness could become professional risk. I opened a separate form and initiated a conflict of interest disclosure. I listed the company name. I listed my brother's full legal name. I noted the familial relationship. I did not editorialize. By 8:27, the disclosure was logged. By 8:34, supervisory review was triggered automatically. Systems are faster than families. At 9:02, my phone lit up again. A text from my mother. "Did you see it? I hope you like the app. Ethan says it's the future." I looked at the flagged accounts repopulating in real time on my secure terminal. Additional transfers were clearing through the same corridor. The pattern was accelerating. I typed back, "I saw it. Thank you." She called immediately. Her voice was warm, satisfied. "Isn't it convenient? It makes everything feel bigger. Bigger." I watched as another five-figure wire moved from the offshore source into a domestic holding account tied to the same network. "Yes," I said, "it does." "You work so hard," she continued. "Ethan says his investors love this platform. It's modern. You should think about using it more." Investors? I rotated the screen and examined a newly surfaced entity connected to Ethan's company. Another shell. Recently formed. Identical registered agent. No employees. "Maybe," I replied. She lowered her voice slightly as if sharing something special. "I put a little more into his company last month. It's going to be enormous. You'll see." I closed my eyes for one controlled breath. "How much?" I asked. "Oh, just what we could afford," she said quickly. "Don't start worrying. You always worry." I do not worry. I calculate. After we hung up, I returned to the case file and updated the timeline. Maternal investment referenced. Potential willful blindness. Within minutes, an automated alert notified me that the supervisory team had opened a formal inquiry into the expanded network. Audit triggers were scheduled. The transfer to me remained untouched. $500 sitting at the edge of a structure built on movement, concealment, and arrogance. She thought it was just a gift. I thought it was a leak. By 10:12, I was no longer the analyst quietly mapping a distant scheme. I was the point of entry. My real job is to follow the money, and it had just led me home. I did not tell them. For 2 days, I said nothing. The supervisory team moved quickly once the domestic link was confirmed. Audit triggers were sent to the correspondent bank. Requests for additional documentation were issued through proper channels. A quiet flag was placed on the domestic shell connected to Ethan's company. No raids, no headlines, just pressure applied in places that do not show. At work, I spoke in measured sentences. I handed over my documentation and stepped back, as required once a conflict is declared. The task force lead nodded once when I finished my summary. "You did the right thing," he said. I did not respond. Right and necessary are different words. That Thursday, my mother invited me to dinner. "Ethan wants to update everyone," she said. "Big news. You should be proud." I drove to my parents' house at 19:03. The porch light was already on. The windows glowed warm against the early dark. From the outside, it looked unchanged, stable, secure. Inside, the dining table was set for 4. My father poured wine with careful generosity. Ethan stood near the head of the table, phone in hand, already mid-explanation about liquidity events and cross-border expansion. I took my usual seat near the corner. My mother touched my shoulder as she passed. "You look tired," she said softly. "You work too hard." "I manage," I replied. Ethan began describing a new round of funding. "International interest," he said. "Sophisticated capital, not the kind of small domestic thinking most people are used to." He glanced at me briefly when he said it. My father smiled. "That's my boy. Building something real." I watched Ethan's hands as he spoke. Confident, animated. He believed what he was saying. That was the most dangerous part. "Mom increased her stake," he added casually. "She understands scale." I turned my glass once on the table. "How are the funds structured?" I asked. He paused. "What do you mean?" "The incoming capital," I said. "Debt instruments, equity, convertible notes." My father sighed lightly, as if I had introduced unnecessary complexity. "Don't interrogate him," he said. "This isn't one of your reports." Ethan laughed. "Relax, it's standard structuring." "Offshore vehicles, nothing unusual." "Offshore where?" I asked. He leaned back in his chair. "You wouldn't know the jurisdiction." I held his gaze. My mother set down the serving spoon with a little more force than required. "Can we not turn this into something tense?" she said. "It's a celebration." Celebration. Earlier that afternoon, a preliminary internal memo had circulated. The correspondent bank had failed to produce satisfactory documentation for several inbound wires. 2 of the associated shell entities had already been suspended pending review. Ethan continued. "We're moving fast. That's how growth works. You can't build something disruptive by playing small." My father nodded. "Exactly. Risk is part of success." I studied the pattern in the wood grain of the table. "Have any compliance inquiries been raised?" I asked. Ethan's jaw tightened slightly. "What is this?" "A question," I said. He exhaled sharply. "You always do this. You hear one buzzword at your office job and suddenly you think everything is suspicious." My mother reached for his arm. "She just worries," she said. "It's her nature." I do not worry. I evaluate. I set my fork down. "If a financial institution requests additional documentation," I said calmly, "how quickly can your company produce beneficial ownership disclosures?" The room shifted. My father straightened in his chair. "Why would that matter?" "It's hypothetical," I replied. Ethan's confidence flickered for a fraction of a second. Then it returned. "We're covered," he said. "All legal." "Good," I answered. I did not press further, because by 2017 my secure phone vibrated in my pocket. I excused myself and stepped into the hallway. The message was brief. "Domestic entity under formal review. Audit initiated." I stood there for a moment, listening to the muffled sound of my family laughing in the dining room. Audit initiated. The system had begun to move. When I returned to the table, dessert had been served. My mother was describing how proud she felt to support innovation. My father spoke about legacy. Ethan outlined future valuations with expanding hands. No one asked about my day. I watched them and understood something clearly. They believed the illusion of success was structural, permanent. They believed confidence was insulation. They did not understand systems. Within 24 hours, the first formal inquiry letter would reach Ethan's registered office. Within 48, the bank holding the intermediary accounts would freeze specific transfers pending clarification. Automated reporting thresholds would trigger secondary reviews. No one would knock on the door. Not yet. My mother leaned toward me as we cleared the plates. "You should invest too," she whispered. "Don't be the only one who misses out." I met her eyes. "Mom," I said quietly, "did the bank ever contact you about unusual transactions?" She hesitated. "Too long." "Banks send warnings all the time," she replied lightly. "It's automated. They overreact." "How many warnings?" I asked. Her smile thinned. "Don't start." My father's voice cut in from across the room. "If you have something to say, say it." I looked at him steadily. "This isn't family drama," I said. "It's regulatory exposure." Ethan stood abruptly. "You're unbelievable," he said. "You can't stand that I built something bigger than your little spreadsheets." I did not raise my voice. "I follow money," I said. Silence settled. Ethan laughed once, but it was sharper now. "So follow it somewhere else." I nodded. "I already am." They did not understand the sentence. That night at 2341, the first asset hold was placed on one of the shell entities tied to the offshore corridor. At 7:12 the next morning, Ethan called me. "What did you do?" he asked. I sat at my desk reviewing the freeze confirmation. "I declared a conflict," I said. There was breathing on the other end. Fast. "They're asking for documentation we don't have," he said. "They're questioning transfers that are completely legitimate." "Provide what they request," I replied. "You started this," he said. "No," I answered. "You did." He hung up. By midday, my mother left 3 voicemails. "This is getting out of hand," she said in the last one. "They're treating us like criminals." I archived the messages. At 16:03, the task force expanded the review to include domestic investors who had ignored repeated compliance warnings from their financial institutions. My mother's name appeared on the list. Professional duty is simple in theory. You follow the chain to the end, even if the end is your own family. The formal notice reached them on a Monday. It arrived by certified mail to the registered office address listed for Ethan's company, a mailbox suite in a building that rented identities by the month. The clerk signed for it without reading the return label. By noon, Ethan was in my mother's kitchen with the envelope open and his composure gone. I was at my desk when the second phase authorization was logged in the system. Expanded audit, transaction tracing across affiliated entities, domestic investor review. I read each line once, no emotion, just sequence. At 13:14, my phone vibrated. Ethan. I let it ring twice before answering. "They're accusing us of sanction exposure," he said without greeting. His voice was tight, controlled in the way men speak when they are close to losing control. "That's insane." "They're asking for documentation," I replied. "It's the same thing," he snapped. "You know how this works. They freeze accounts first, ask questions later." "Yes," I said. "I do." Silence pressed between us. "You fed them something," he said. "I declared a conflict of interest," I answered. "I handed over what I had already documented." "You documented your own brother?" I looked at the case file open in front of me. Timestamps, routing data, corporate overlaps. "I documented a transaction network," I said. He exhaled hard enough for the sound to distort in the receiver. "Mom invested everything she could," he said. "You're going to destroy her." I did not respond to that. By 14:02, the intermediary bank had placed temporary holds on 3 inbound wires tied to the offshore corridor. One of the shell companies had failed to provide beneficial ownership disclosure within the requested window. The system does not respond to emotion. It responds to absence. At 17:27, my mother called. Her voice was different now, less warmth, more calculation. "They froze his operating account," she said. "Payroll, vendor payments, everything." "Did he provide the requested documentation?" I asked. "They're asking for things that take time," she said sharply. "You can't expect people to produce international records overnight." "They've had weeks," I replied. There was a pause. "We received some notices," she admitted quietly. "Compliance alerts. But Ethan said they were automated." "How many?" I asked again. "I don't remember." I pictured the automated warnings that banks send when unusual cross-border activity appears, each one logged, each one requiring acknowledgement. "Did you sign acknowledgement forms?" I asked. "They said it was routine," she said. "You're making this into something dramatic." "I'm not," I said. "The system is." That night, the task force scheduled interviews, not interrogations, clarifications. Ethan retained an attorney by morning. The attorney contacted the agency requesting access to the inquiry scope, standard procedure, professional tone. By then, the transaction map was complete. The offshore corridor was linked to a sanctioned entity operating through layered intermediaries. The pattern matched known sanction evasion techniques. Small domestic startups were used as temporary conduits. Funds cycled through, rebranded as investment capital. Ethan's company was one of 6. Whether he knew the full structure did not change the exposure. On Wednesday, 2 agents visited the mailbox suite listed as his company's principal office. They documented the absence of operational presence, photographs, statements, timestamps. The report was uploaded before lunch. At 15:48, the freeze order expanded. My mother's personal investment account was flagged for review due to repeated ignored compliance warnings. The pattern showed that she had overridden at least 3 automated advisories from her bank regarding unusual transfer activity. Willful blindness is a legal category. By evening, my father called. He rarely calls. "You need to fix this," he said. "I don't have that authority," I replied. "You work there," he insisted. "You can make a call." I recused myself, I said. "I have no operational role in the investigation." He lowered his voice, as if speaking reason into me. "Family comes first." I let the silence extend long enough for him to hear it. "This is national security," I said finally, "not a dinner argument." "You're choosing strangers over us," he said. "No," I answered. "I'm choosing the law." He hung up. On Friday, Ethan was formally charged with financial fraud and conspiracy to evade sanctions. The indictment was sealed for 6 hours before becoming public record. When it did, the headlines were restrained but precise. Local startup founder arrested in federal financial probe. There were no photographs of him in handcuffs, just a courthouse image, neutral lighting, official language. My mother's name appeared in a secondary filing, charged with participation in unlawful transfers and failure to heed compliance directives. Not mastermind, not architect, participant. At work, I sat through the briefing like any other analyst. Case summary, asset freeze totals, international coordination notes. The task force lead acknowledged my earlier documentation with a brief nod. "Precision under pressure," he said. I wrote nothing down. By afternoon, my phone was silent. No calls, no messages. The network was dismantled within 72 hours of the first freeze. Assets were secured, digital wallets seized, shell entities dissolved under court order. Systems close quickly once they begin. Late that evening, an email arrived in my personal inbox from my mother's defense attorney. Subject line, character statement request. The message was polite, structured. It explained that my testimony regarding her intentions and general character could influence sentencing considerations. I read it once, then again. I did not feel anger or satisfaction, just clarity. My mother believed money was power, that proximity to capital meant protection, that if you stood close enough to growth, you were insulated from consequence. She believed systems were negotiable. In my world, power is truth recorded in ledgers. It is documentation that does not forget. It is structure, applied evenly. I archived the email without replying. On Monday morning, I was informed of my promotion. Not because of the case itself. Promotions do not reward family exposure. They reward process. Composure, my supervisor said. Documentation integrity. Timing. I accepted the notice without expression. That evening, I walked past the building where I work and watched the lights turn off one by one. Inside, other analysts were beginning other cases, other patterns. Some of them would lead to strangers. One led to my brother. I followed the money, and I finished the job. The sentencing date was set for early autumn. I did not attend the arraignment. I did not attend the preliminary hearing. My name appeared only once in the public record, listed in procedural language under disclosure of conflict and transfer of analysis to supervisory review. I remained where I always am, at my desk, inside the system. The asset freeze totals stabilized within a week. The offshore corridor collapsed under coordinated pressure from 3 jurisdictions. The correspondent bank entered remediation oversight. The shell companies dissolved on paper before they were dissolved in practice. Ethan's company website remained online for several days after his arrest. Clean branding, promises of innovation, testimonials that no longer existed. Illusions take time to disappear. My mother's defense attorney sent a second email, this one shorter. Your statement could significantly influence the court's perception of intent. Intent. I closed the message and archived it beside the first. I did not owe perception, I owed accuracy. The week before sentencing, my father appeared at my apartment unannounced. He stood in the hallway outside my door, hands folded in front of him as if approaching a meeting he did not want to attend. He looked smaller than I remembered, or perhaps I was simply standing straighter. You won, he said without greeting. This isn't a competition, I replied. He stepped inside when I moved aside. He did not look around. He did not sit. They're saying she could face real time, he said. Probation, maybe. But there's a chance. I've read the filings, I interrupted gently. His jaw tightened. You could help, he said. You could explain that she didn't understand. I studied his face. She overrode 3 compliance warnings, I said. She signed acknowledgement forms. She trusted her son, he replied. Trust doesn't erase documentation, I said. He looked at me then with something that almost resembled recognition. When did you become this cold? He asked. I did not answer immediately. I'm not cold, I said finally. I'm consistent. He exhaled and looked toward the window. She's your mother. And I'm an analyst, I replied. He left without raising his voice. On the morning of sentencing, I went to work. I logged into the secure system at 7 o'clock as usual. The case file had transitioned to closed status. Asset recovery ongoing. International cooperation notes archived. At 9:32, a colleague forwarded a public summary from the courthouse feed. Ethan received a custodial sentence. Financial fraud, conspiracy, reduced term due to cooperation after arrest. My mother received probation, substantial fines, and mandatory compliance education. The court noted repeated ignored warnings, but acknowledged lack of direct orchestration. Participant, not architect. I read the summary once, then minimized it. At 11:14, I was called into a conference room. The division director was present. So was my supervisor. A brief acknowledgement of procedural integrity, a promotion effective immediately, expanded oversight responsibilities. You maintained composure under personal pressure, the director said. That matters. I nodded. Precision is quiet. That evening, another email arrived from the defense attorney. Thank you for your time. We understand your decision. No accusation, no appeal, just acknowledgement. I archived that one as well. Weeks passed. My mother sent one handwritten letter from her home address after sentencing. The envelope was thin, the handwriting tighter than usual. She wrote that she never intended harm, that she believed in Ethan, that she thought the warnings were routine obstacles placed in the path of ambition. She did not ask for forgiveness. She did not apologize directly. She wrote that money had always meant safety to her, that growth felt like protection. I folded the letter once and placed it in a drawer. I did not respond. The network that connected us through transactions no longer existed. The accounts were frozen, the entities dissolved, the corridor sealed. But family ties do not dissolve under court order. They shift. At work, I continued to follow new patterns, new corridors, new names. Each case begins the same way, a small anomaly, a transaction that does not align, a gift that feels slightly misplaced. I no longer receive birthday transfers. My phone remains quiet on that date now. There is distance where noise used to be. Some evenings I walk past my old neighborhood without stopping. The house looks unchanged from the street. Porch lights steady, curtains drawn. Inside, I know there are fewer conversations about expansion, fewer projections about scale. Systems do not negotiate with belief, they respond to evidence. I did not raise my voice. I did not accuse. I did not explain myself at dinner tables or in hallways. I followed the chain to its end. In my world, power is not volume. It is documentation. It is timing. It is the decision to remain still when others expect you to bend. My mother believed money was power. I learned that truth is. And truth, once recorded, does not flinch. If you were in my position, would you have written the statement? Do you believe loyalty and responsibility can occupy the same space? If this story stayed with you, tell me what part unsettled you most. And if you want to read more quiet reckonings like this, you are welcome to stay.